Right, so Israel are currently engaging in ongoing hostilities on a total of no less than 7 fronts right now, with the atrocities against the people of Gaza still ongoing, now having been joined by those coming under attack in the West Bank. Along with them, though, there are those fighting Israel in solidarity with Palestine, of course, such as Yemen, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq and Syria. We know Benjamin Netanyahu is determined to see this war expand as far as it needs to grow and drag in more countries in the hope their staunchest allies in the US will come to their aid with more armaments than they are already getting, but also boots on the ground. It shouldn't come as much of a surprise that, despite their economy collapsing under the weight of the aggression they are already engaged in, the picking on someone else, risking military engagement on an 8th front, is now looking more and more likely as well, as accusations and belligerence towards even a mediator and a peace broker like Egypt might finally tip the scales over there now too. Right, so Egypt, they have, as a nation, largely been involved in hosting and brokering peace negotiations, along with Qatar and allegedly the United States as well, between Israel and Hamas, since things broke out and escalated following the night of October 7th. But given the US to keep arming Israel, and they could therefore unilaterally lead a cessation in Israel's genocide, I have always found it a little bit rich that they involved themselves in the peace negotiations too. But there we are. They are the 3 leading nations at the centre of these ceasefire talks. Egypt have been mediators in the region go back years though. They've acted as go-betweens between Israel and Hamas, and indeed it was they who tipped Israel off to something brewing in Gaza some 6 weeks before that attack on the night of October 7th. Not that got widely reported at all, though, or even acknowledged by Israel. They denied it entirely, much to Egypt's chagrin. Netanyahu fundamentally cannot afford peace now, though. In fact, he's been told by his national security minister, the hard-right maniac Itamar Ben-Gvir, that he will bring the government down if Netanyahu ever agrees to a ceasefire. So with that sort of person holding the balance of power in Netanyahu's government, what need has he got for engaging meaningfully in peace negotiations at all? He has for 9 months been intentionally scuppering them, and it's pretty obvious to see why that is. He wants to stay in post. That is what is most important to him. Stay on as Prime Minister. That is his primary objective. Not peace, not getting hostages back, no nothing. He wakes up every day, I imagine, thinking about what will keep him in power 1 day longer, 1 week longer, 1 month longer. And it all comes down to appeasement of his own far-right elements of his own coalition. And that means the war in Gaza must go on. If it means going back over ground they have already levelled, so be it. They're doing that. If it means the West Bank must be targeted next, and it will be for reasons that they will have suddenly found, such as claims of Hamas now being there when Hamas are a Gaza entity. And if a wider war is needed on top of those 7 fronts Israel is engaged in atrocities over already, then so be it, even as their own economy teeters on collapse. But hey, he's probably factored in that the US will never allow his nation's economy to go under. Genocide Joe Biden having already given them billions with which to buy more US weaponry. So what's more American public money, right? When is enough for them, I wonder? But back to Netanyahu, because 7 fronts is not enough anymore either. Others still want peace, others still want a withdrawal from Gaza, and a plan for that put forward by his own team, by Israel as well, by ministers, even as still others demand more death and destruction in the name of creating more real estate for the Zionist state. He is being pulled in more than one direction here. It's an unsustainable path to inevitable destruction for Israel, though. And as much as the US are determined that they'll do whatever it takes for their ally Israel, their actions strike me as more akin to helping hasten its own implosion, which is a conversation more and more commentators are actually having. Certainly, comments recently from a former Israeli general called Yitzhak Brick, written in an Israeli newspaper Haaretz just the other day, have said as much. And heck, I was saying as much in another video nearly a fortnight ago, not to blow my own trumpet too much, but the signs are obviously there, and they've been there for quite a while now. Netanyahu is desperate. There's no solution to dig him out of the hole he has put himself in. The hard right will pull the plug on the government if he agrees to a ceasefire. Others in his coalition might grumble about no ceasefire forthcoming, but so far they've stayed put despite that. So Netanyahu is obviously going to lean towards escalation with things being what they are. So why not, with all of these factors taken into consideration, not just start yet another war on yet another front? And it seems his target might actually be that historical peace mediator next door, Egypt. One of the major sticking points Netanyahu has created in this latest round of ceasefire talks has been over the matter of the Philadelphia corridor, which is basically the border between Gaza and Egypt. 14 kilometres long is all it is, 100 metres wide, which Netanyahu is refusing to vacate as a condition of ceasefire talks, of a ceasefire agreement. Now, this corridor was set up following the 1979 Camp David Accords, which actually ended war between Egypt and Israel. I've spoken of this in other videos previously. 1979 being well before the formation of Hamas at that, incidentally, but there's been lasting peace and closer ties between Israel and Egypt in the years since, up until now, at least anyway. Where will things go from here? Well, we can only ponder at this point in time. It's a violation of the peace accords for Israel to be in the Philadelphia corridor. It is a border where responsibility lies with Egypt and Gaza only. But aside from just being there being a problem, it's been Netanyahu's attempts to justify staying there that are equally so, because he has now accused Egypt of smuggling weapons into Gaza to Hamas to fight back against Israel. Naturally, Egypt hath rejected this notion in no uncertain terms and called this move out for exactly what it is, as this excerpt from Turkish outlet Anadolu Agency explains. Egypt rejected Tuesday claims by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu that weapons were being smuggled to Hamas through its border. In a statement, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry called Netanyahu's accusations an attempt to hinder mediation efforts to reach a Gaza ceasefire and prisoner swap deal. On Monday, Netanyahu renewed his refusal to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor, a demilitarized area along Egypt's border with Gaza. The Israeli premier claimed that the corridor was a lifeline for Hamas to rearm. Cairo accused Netanyahu of trying to involve Egypt to divert Israeli public opinion and obstruct a ceasefire and hostage swap deal, as well as hindering mediation efforts by Egypt, Qatar and the US. It held the Israeli government responsible for the consequences of these statements, which exacerbate the situation and aim to justify aggressive and inflammatory policies leading to further escalation in the region. Egypt reiterated its commitment to continuing its historic role in leading the peace process in the region to maintain regional peace and security and achieve stability for all the peoples of the region. Egypt rejects any Israeli military presence along the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing in southern Gaza. Netanyahu wants further escalation and to screw up the latest attempt at a ceasefire. We all know this is what he repeatedly does now, surely. But isn't it refreshing to see a news outlet actually say it? Egypt isn't the only one calling Israel out for these rancid accusations either. Jordan, who have arguably more than any other Arab nation in the region sought to align itself with Israel, has called this out as a pack of lies as well, even going so far as to have their foreign ministry state publicly that they have offered full solidarity with Egypt in confronting all Israeli claims. Qatar, as another of the peace brokering nations in the region, have said as much as well. Palestine obviously have to, as has Kuwait. Israel's list of friends is waning. Its support continues to slide. Its excuses and playing the victim card falling on more and more deaf ears as its claims become more wide-ranging and more ridiculous. Even insiders in Israel have said as much that this move is all about sabotaging the latest round of ceasefire talks and screwing up prisoner exchange deals, as massive protests through the streets of Tel Aviv, night after night, are showing, for nothing more than Netanyahu's own political gain. And if that doesn't expose the cracks in Netanyahu's regime behind the scenes, I really don't know what does. Here's an excerpt from the Quds News Network, a Palestinian news outlet, commenting, however, on a narrative put out by Israeli newspaper Haaretz, though. Sources close to the Israeli government have revealed that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is deliberately undermining potential prisoner deals for his own political gain. According to an analysis published in Haaretz, Netanyahu decided weeks ago that he did not want a deal to free Israeli prisoners, despite opportunities arising. Netanyahu reportedly used the Philadelphia corridor, an area along the Gaza-Egypt border, as a strategic tool to rally support from right-wing factions within the occupation state. By focusing public and media attention on the corridor, Netanyahu effectively shifted the narrative away from the issue of the prisoners' fate, turning it instead into a debate over security measures. Nonsense talk of security, accusing Egypt of being arms dealers for Hamas effectively, all designed to get people off talk of the hostages held in Gaza and talk of prisoner exchange deals, which of course is why Hamas took those people on the night of October 7th to begin with. They want their own prisoners back. Israel holds some 10,000 of them. Netanyahu would rather risk war with yet another country than rescue those hostages Hamas took, is another way of looking at this set of events, aside from consolidating his own backside in the prime ministership of Israel. There really can be no end to any of this unless he is somehow removed. I really am at that point in my firm belief on this. Can the strike action ongoing in Israel do it, perhaps, though? General strike began earlier this week to try and bring it all to a head. Well, maybe, but that'll only work for as long as the US doesn't end up undermining it with more financial aid to Israel. And who, frankly, would ever rule that out? It seems to be a bottomless pot of cash from the Bank of Biden. But if so, the US are singularly keeping this regime going and keeping Netanyahu in power at that. And therefore they end up being the only nation capable of ending things, as actually they have been all along. And while, of course, this issue applies to Gaza most of all, we cannot ignore the fact that atrocities have ramped up even further in the West Bank. And again, this is at the behest of Netanyahu's insane right-wing coalition partners. And so for as much as we can talk about Netanyahu consolidating his position and remaining prime minister above anything else, is he really in charge at all bears consideration. As this video recommendation ponders over, it'll clue you in about as your suggested next watch. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.